Well, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for August 22nd to order. Welcome, everybody. And we're going to start out tonight with a proclamation for Water and Wastewater Workers Week. Whereas the water and wastewater workforce in the city of Ames have dedicated themselves to combining environmental passion and science with technical skills and expertise to deliver safe, quality drinking water and protect the aquatic resources of Ames, and whereas their commitment to protecting public health is displayed 24 hours a day, 7 days per week, without regard to weather or holiday, and whereas their applied environmentalism is essential to the continued quality of life in Ames and in promoting sustainability throughout the community, and whereas Iowa Governor Reynolds has declared this as Water and Wastewater Workers in Iowa Week, therefore I, John A. Halen, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim August 20th to 26th, 2023 as Water and Wastewater Workers Week in Ames, and urge all residents of Ames to take a moment to reflect upon the important role these dedicated employees fulfill in protecting our way of life in Ames. John, you going to share a few words, or John?
I will just real quickly, we appreciate the recognition, Mayor, along with the recognition from Governor Reynolds. These folks, we've got representatives here from several of our divisions. Derek's with Laboratory Services, Dina's with the Water Meter Division, Heidi's with our Administration Division, Emily is with the Water Treatment Plant, and John's representing the folks from Public Works that are a part of the utility as well. But it's not just in our departments. One of the advantages of being a municipal utility is that we get to lean on Mark Lambert and the legal department and the human resources department and the finance department. And all of those pieces come together to make the utilities function the way they do. So we appreciate the proclamation. Thank you very much.
Well, we'd like to welcome Quinn to the dais tonight. Quinn is the soon-to-be official vice president, apparently, of Iowa State, and he's filling in this evening for ex officio. So, Quinn, thank you for being here. And we will move on to consent agenda. Does any council member wish to pull any item from consent tonight? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve consent.
Move that. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. We'll move on to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. We ask people to limit their time to 3 minutes or less. And I have one card from Richard. If you want to go ahead and come up to the podium, Richard.
The last city council meeting, I spoke about the senior variety show. It's like I was told they didn't want to have wear my T-shirt this past year, and it's like when I was at I had bought a ticket to go to the thing, and it's like when they had the intermission, I just stood up there where I was sitting and sang a song that lasted for as long as I was planning to be there. And I hear that neither Craig Kaufman nor Brian Phillips, the people that told me from the city that I could not go there, Deb Chukroft told me that too, that it's like I was not allowed to go into the thing for last year. And they told me that last year they wanted me to perform a skit and do one line in one of the skits that just said, "Have the best day ever." You know, and I told them the city wouldn't allow me to go into to do that. You know, I came up here, I also wanted to speak about some of the things that have been on my mind for the longest time. You know, they try to get people to behave like computers at Iowa State and computers to behave like people, and it's all right for computers to lie, harm, and murder. And I filed a bunch of Freedom of Information Act requests with a lot of the agencies in the federal government. Prove your computers are safe from all the computer viruses. And it's pathetic how little this is a long time ago, you know. And it's like they try to get people to behave like computers and computers to behave like people. And it's all right for computers to lie, harm, and murder. And that's what they're programmed to do, to behave just like people. And it's like if you're going to be concerned about all kinds of things like climate change and things like that, it seems to me that those scientists, Einstein used to say, "I'm God." When other scientists would present him theories of the universe, and like, you're better than God, you're better than Jesus, you're better than I am. It doesn't take much to be better than me. You know, it's like they throw me out of churches.
Richard, how does this apply to city business tonight? Thank you. Anybody else? You introduce yourself and then you may start.
Well, my name is Marilyn Devick, and I live at 2019 Kildee Street. We've lived there for 26 years, over 26 years. I've lived in Ames for almost 50 years. We aren't strangers to the South Campus neighborhood. We live really close to the Greek system houses. We live a little just straight, really close to Beach Avenue. We live just a few blocks away from the football stadium. Late last week, these signs, I borrowed this one for show and tell for you tonight. I'll give it back. They appeared in my neighborhood. and others around near campus. And you, as council, are probably familiar with why those were put up. But can you put yourself in the place of a new student or a new parent bringing their child to campus? They're not going to see Ames as being a very welcoming and friendly community with these kinds of signs. I think it communicates that there's a bunch of snobby old people that live in this neighborhood that want to keep them out. And I think it's unfriendly and even threatening. I've heard there's parties at 801 Day, which was last Saturday. And there's even one a couple doors down from me, last year. This year there was a few students on the corner having a little party. It wasn't, obnoxious or anything. But I want to read to you from your proclamation about, or whatever you call this, your information about 801 Day, especially regarding illegal parking, about looking carefully at the signs. Many residential streets are narrow and only allow parking on one side of the street. Emergency vehicles must be able to safely pass through the street. Get that? Emergency vehicles must be able to safely pass through the street. Well, have you ever been in my neighborhood on football game days? I'll tell you what happens. I can give you from experience. I've lived there 26 years. First, all the people park legally on the right side, one side of the street, and then one car thinks, oh, I'm just going to park on the other side of the street. I don't care if I get a ticket. And pretty soon the whole street has parking on both sides of the street. It's not safe, but I don't see signs like this going up every football game day. And I guess what I'm concerned about is there's a little bit of a double standard here. And when I see students getting threatened with being towed, and I see sometimes the cars that are parked illegally on football games days not even getting ticketed. Sometimes that happens. I just think that it communicates the wrong perspective. I think it shows it doesn't show that we're welcoming and inviting. And I just want I want you to think about. I gotta turn my page. I want you to think about that. Either this is too radical and too threatening and too overboard, or we need to do something different with football game days. And I'd rather see, we haven't had that many instances of emergency situations, public safety situations. Fortunately, thank the Lord, in my neighborhood. But I just think that these signs are way too radical. And I think I would like to see the council or the director or something like that to direct this either be this ordinance be rescinded or this ordinance be really revised so that especially that it covers the this places where the students live. We are mostly residents who live in our homes. We're not students that live in our homes. And just that you re-examine the whole issue. So, and please don't put any more green signs up in my neighborhood. They're just ugly. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public forum and move on to item number 21, staff report on downtown stakeholder development and redevelopment outreach.
Good evening, Council. So tonight we're back to bring together a lot of public input that we received on two different occasions in the past year regarding development and redevelopment options downtown. What we're really going to talk about tonight is kind of two different categories of the input. We originally started this process with a referral in regard to a letter from AEDC in November of 2022. It was focused on tax abatement program. We gave you a report in November of 22, and then we did some public outreach in January of 23 around that issue, and we'll touch on that for a second. But we've had a robust investment in downtown as a city policy for the past 20 plus years. The city established in 2001 a downtown facade grant program. And then in support of that grant program, which is a 50-50 match program, tax abatement to then allow for some incremental, to allow for abatement of those incremental taxes created by investment downtown. And right now it's a 3-year, 100% abatement program. We've had over, 52? Grants, 54 grants awarded and utilized over these 20 plus years. So I think you've seen us at least, I would say every year we've awarded at least one grant. Some years it can be more than that. We have 2 rounds of grants. The program is really focused on making exterior facade program changes that improve the aesthetic of downtown and really try to open up and expand retail presence at the street level. And that's kind of the history of the program. The ADC referral was looking at it as, should we try to spur additional investment downtown? Maybe it's within buildings that don't need facade program grants because they may already have a compliant facade, or there's no real reason to do exterior work to do that use. So with that discussion, council did give some direction in November of 2022 around the tax abatement program. And at that time, council elected or stated to staff that you were interested in expanding the abatement schedule to match what is typically offered across the city, which is the 3, 5, or 10-year options. The longer options are a sliding scale. They're not 100% abatements. But then within that discussion, the question of eligibility criteria came up, and council asked for staff to do public outreach and to provide some background information regarding kind of 3 separate but very integrated issues. So should the facade program be an eligibility criteria? Meaning, do you have to make facade improvements to get tax abatement? The 3 kind of levels of that question were: do what we do now, which is yes, you have to make a facade improvement. B, let an existing building that has a compliant facade also be eligible. Or C, don't require any exterior changes. Just focus on that they're making investments within a building to be able to get that tax abatement. And then once you started to think about expanding the eligibility beyond just facade improvements, the questions became, should it be tied to targeted uses? Should it be for any type of investment, any type of use downtown, or are there priorities? And council specifically selected looking for feedback around retail, restaurant, entertainment uses, and then adding residential on upper floors or in the back of ground floors. And then the final kind of element of this was, are we incenting the demolition of historic buildings downtown? So part of our downtown is a National Historic District, not all of it, but part of it is. So in November, you asked for options about if we were interested in that, what would we define as an historic building? And we give you a few different options in the staff report. It could be a contributing resource to the district. You could pick a year. You could pick certain blocks. Like, you can define within the abatement program what is historic if you think there's different parts of Main Street or other parts of downtown that are more sensitive than others. So ultimately, we did the outreach in January for that, and that part included a community aspect. So the results are in the staff report about community members as well as downtown stakeholders. So you can see there's about 100 community members took the survey, and about 40-ish self-identified downtown stakeholders of various types that took that. So I think you saw in that summary I think the idea of those 3 priority uses resonated with people. When you could select multiple types of uses that you'd like to see downtown, those were retail, restaurant, and entertainment were the 3 that reached the highest interest level. And then we had follow-up questions about, well, should we incent those? Should it be tied to facade programs, making exterior improvements? And you see the feedback got a little more diluted at that point. There's probably still generally an interest in supporting general investment downtown. Some still interest in not having historic resources demolished, but the input became kind of a little less clear as we went through that. So that's something for you to kind of look at and see how that might influence your discussion about whether to make changes. So for tonight, to close the loop on this original referral, the bullets in white at the bottom are what staff believes we would need direction on if there are to be any changes to the tax abatement program. And I'm not going to have you talk about that now. I'm going to go quickly into the stakeholder summary, and then we'll turn it back over to you for questions and then how to work through this. But these are the questions I think we need to have answered as staff if you want us to make any particular changes to the program. Is there any question about those bottom bullets, about what they mean, or they're really based on that original direction by council? Okay. So after we did this outreach, council asked for us to go back and do broader downtown stakeholder input and to partner with AEDC and chamber staff to get the word out and host public meetings and not focus just on abatement, but to talk about development and redevelopment in general downtown. So this could be anything from new construction to replace a building, to remodeling an existing building, to change uses, maybe add more square footage, maybe upgrade the facilities. It could be about anything. So there were no limits to what the public input could be about. So we hosted 2 different meetings, one in the evening and one in the morning. We had about 20 participants, and the notification is really targeted to property and business owners. So really, we're trying to get to the people that are the users of the programs, not the general public that's benefiting from the status or the character of downtown in general. So a lot of individual comments. You got a bulleted list of that prepared by chamber staff, and then in the staff report, we tried to categorize them more the way the city would look at it from like a programming or an operational standpoint. And that's what's listed here. Is we obviously tried to focus in the staff report about kind of the context of the program or the rules that are in place, and then see how that stakeholder input related to current conditions or things that might be able to be changed based on those individual interests that were identified at that meeting. Now, when you gave us direction to do the June meeting, it was not to pursue a specific program. So you can see we have dozens of comments. They can affect the facade program. They could be new programs. They could be codes or permitting or zoning issues as well. And if there's any follow-up in relation to those comments, I don't know that you could take action tonight because there's a long list there. But if there are priorities, that could come out of the meeting, or obviously you could defer that for further consideration, and we can come back at your discretion in the future. So that's kind of the summary of the report. We're happy to walk through the individual comments that you have questions about, the individual programs that maybe weren't articulated clearly here, or you have questions about maybe what the comments were trying to get at. And then if you do have questions about, we do have some maps if you need to understand the boundaries of downtown, the historic district, the zoning, or the land use plan. So those are available for review as well. So with that, I want to give it back to council, ask questions, and then I think there was some interest in public comment as well.
Thanks, Kelly. Questions or comments?
Kelly, do you know offhand whether the issue of changing the facade grant program to a downtown development grant program is still sitting in the parking lot of the planning and housing work plan? It was there for many years.
I believe that you've made 2 changes to the program in the last 15 months. You altered the eligibility to do rehabilitation of historic features as a new element, and then you increased the budget for the program to $75,000 a year and up to $25,000 a grant. So my recollection is with those 2 changes, you removed the program from the parking lot, thinking you had addressed the most immediate issues that have been brought up rather than let's blow it up and investigate a new program. So I don't believe it's in the parking lot anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, in your experience in working with businesses who either have received a facade grant or who have tried to, what do you find are maybe trends or common themes and the challenges that people have in meeting the requirements?
So Benjamin's my guy that deals with the solicitation of the grants and works through it with the customer. So I'll give him a chance to respond, and then maybe I have a couple more years of other experience as well. So Benjamin, how would you answer that?
And your question, Councilmember, was about specifically about the downtown grants and what what stumbling blocks people encountered or what
Yeah,
made
I'm
them
just
not
saying, are there
eligible?
some trends and repeat challenges that have come to light, or things where people have started to apply but found it too challenging and just decided to stop the process altogether? Are there some things that keep repeating themselves?
Yeah, I think the most common thing is people, you know, people are expecting it to be a facade maintenance grant, and it's just not. It's to change the facade to bring it into compliance with the downtown guidelines. So if you have a building that is already compliant, which many of the buildings are downtown, there's no eligibility there unless, as Kelly mentioned, we did the recent change to enable the rehabilitation of historically significant features like windows. I was actually just talking to somebody yesterday about the possibility of using the new grant eligibility for the rehabilitation of some second-story windows that are original to that facade.
So I think just in general, probably, people might have an idea how they want to do their building, and then they find out we have criteria if you want to have a grant. So sometimes that doesn't reflect what they're interested in doing. So they might drop out of the program. They might do it on their own without a grant. I think the other question was, which I don't think we have good data on, is what's the cost escalation over 20 years? That's why we boosted the funding to still be a 50-50 grant, but go up to 25,000, was to recognize that costs had gone up. So some people, even with the grant, don't pursue the project, or they scale it down to get things, a smaller project that they can afford with still getting grant money at the same time.
Yeah, I guess I was sort of curious if there were common themes in people expressing disagreement or concern with windows or certain materials or the cost of those things, like if that's a repeat issue.
I mean, I think that there's a look that's defined by the guidelines. It has preferences for materials, but it doesn't dictate precisely the materiality that has to go into it. So I think what I remember, like if you think of the town center building, the larger building next to Tom Evans Plaza, its materials, it was a big project. It was an expensive project. We as the city accepted basically the lowest level of materials that could be consistent with the intended look for that one, versus maybe a smaller project where it's really obvious it needs to be brick or have some cementous base to it. That is the expectation, because it really just needs to match what's there. But town center is an example where it has other materials there because it was such a big project and it was kind of overwhelming for the facade program. We definitely have preferences. I don't know that we have precluded someone from doing a specific material. I think people question, like, again, there's priorities for materials, but then we'll fall back to more affordable materials as we work through the process if necessary.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And along those lines, I'm concerned as well that the goal in sometimes is getting in the way of good projects. And so whether it's materials, sometimes the desired materials are cost prohibitive. And I'd like to see some flexibility in materials and even on some of the design aspects. I personally would like to see some more flexibility in that. And so we can follow precisely these design guidelines. That's going to get you a particular look all the time. But I think that there could be some flexibility shown there to represent the spirit of that design and create some greater flexibility. And a final thing, just while I have the floor, I'd like to think about the process too. I've been wondering whether this is a process that even needs to come to council. So I would like to shift more issues with respect to project approvals to staff, to empower staff to take these off of council. We spend way too much time as a council wrapping ourselves around aesthetic matters. I would like to empower the staff, and we trust you, your professional staff. We need to give you guidance, but I'd like to try to find more ways to say yes on projects and have that be done at the city staff level. And if we need to have some kind of a process of appeal, we've got models of how that could be done, again, that don't necessarily involve the council.
Agreed.
Kelly, have we, in this process, talked to the Main Street, Iowa people about what kinds of grant programs are being used successfully in other historic downtown areas? Because I know that one of the reasons that downtown development grant sat in the parking lot for so long was because Main Street was encouraging us to consider changing from a facade grant to this broader type of grant that would enable other sorts of work to be done. And Main Street as an organization here blew hot and cold over whether they wanted to have that change in the program or not. And now we've got again, a different board and a different vision for Main Street. And I know that we have some members from Main Street here, but it seems like it might be useful finding out what is being done elsewhere with these grants and what Main Street is currently thinking about the facade grant. You know, has it run its usefulness, or would it still be useful, but only as an ancillary grant in conjunction with something that's broader? So really two different grant types.
I don't think we talked to Main Street, Iowa in the last 9 months. I don't believe that's happened. It's probably been a couple of years since anybody really looked at that. Again, we were charged to look at that directly. So no, we didn't investigate that. I think in general, you can see the comments about the facade program. They vary greatly from I want maintenance paid for to why don't you just pay me to do what I want to do to my building instead of what has been traditionally done on Main Street. So you can see individuals' comments. We didn't take a package to Main Street. The board didn't get to see, here's a proposal of how to modify this. And I also think because of the recent changes, I don't know that anybody was really aware that we had increased the funding because we haven't gone out for the round yet with increased funding. No one's taken advantage of the historic rehabilitation option yet, correct?
Not yet.
Because they've had one opportunity to do that. So those two little things aren't probably really publicly known yet.
I would, go
Let
ahead.
me just finish. It seems to me as I read the staff report that what we really have is these two tracks. We've got the facade improvement track, which is pretty much the standard track that we have been on.
Mhm.
And then we've got the potential for this expansion and re-envisioning of other ways to support the development and redevelopment of downtown. And I know, I guess I'll give my input at this point. I honestly think that those are two separate goals and that we should be considering two separate programs so that we aren't linking the facade improvements to everything else. Because honestly, some of the facade improvements, nice that they might look, are lipstick on a pig when your building has significant structural issues. And we aren't really helping with those significant structural issues while we're saying, gosh, it would look really beautiful if you made these facade improvements. So I would be in favor of looking at two different types of grants to uncouple the facade grant from something that enables us to maintain the structural integrity of buildings. I'm not in favor of incenting demolition of historic structures. I will vote against that every time. But I am in favor of us figuring out ways to help people maintain those structures in meaningful ways so that they're safe and that they can continue to create a downtown destination that has some quality.
And I would dovetail. I agree with Gloria. I've sort of moved on this. Initially, I was just supportive of a facade grant, but I think that there are some opportunities to rethink what we're doing. One thing that hasn't been mentioned We have aggressive climate action goals. One of the things we could ask the question is, are there types of improvements that would result in energy efficiencies that we could consider? I think that would be an interesting line of analysis. We haven't discussed that at all. And obviously, one of the challenges with old buildings is that sometimes the task of shoring up these buildings, and John can speak to this as well as anyone here, can be really, really expensive. And so we're stewarding the community's tax dollars. And so there may be some hard decisions, but sometimes these are really, really expensive. And so to what degree are we going to allocate very large sums of money for a particular, one project? And so at some point, as much as we want to save a particular building, there may have to be other sources of funds to provide for the structural integrity of a building. It may not be us. And so I just want to be careful to create the expectation that we can only do so much for a particular building.
Anita, Rachel, or Rama, do you want to weigh in or ask any questions or comment?
I mean, I don't have much to add. I really appreciate the points that have been made so far. And I think I too, I mean, I'm in the same boat too, where I see a lot of things that could be done, but are sort of limited by the criteria, though they've served us well. So I don't mean that in a bad way, but there's still more work to be done. And how do we help that happen?
Great.
Yeah, I'm sort of interested in decoupling the program as well, kind of going the direction of two separate programs, having a facade program, but then another program that we can use for other things to give incentives for downtown revitalization. So I think the facade grant has served its purpose to this point, but I think it makes sense to have two separate ones going forward.
So I've heard the word decouple a number of times. Decouple is also used in the staff report and alludes to decoupling, doing a facade grant project and getting tax abatement. Is that what you're referring to, or is that something else that you want to clarify on what you mean by decouple?
I would say that's one of the means of decoupling, but the other is the changes that we made recently still have facade improvement linked to other things in the first round, don't they? Or maybe that we've had this discussion before, Kelly. I think there is a connection between facade improvement and maintenance, like window replacement.
Right.
So that's not eligible. So just flat out, I want new windows is not an eligible.
No, I'm sorry, the rehabilitation of the
is
windows.
yes, of like original wood windows. That's now eligible.
But is that connected to facade improvement?
It is a type of facade grant. So it is now an eligible activity within the facade grant program.
So you're not required to do other facade.
You're not required to do
improvements.
anything else. You could just come in and say, I need help rehabbing my wood windows. And you can get a grant just to rehab your wood windows.
Okay, so that was the other thing that I thought was coupled together. And I remember us having that discussion and meeting.
It used to be. So historically, when it first was created, if you removed an existing non-compliant element, that unlocked you being able to add other things that were happening in the facade to the eligible costs. Now we'll just directly say we'll pay for rehab. You don't have to do anything else on the facade.
So then the decoupling is just that tax abatement issue.
Thank you. Nita?
I agree with the discussion. I think it does present an opportunity, as Councilperson Garten said, to think about some of our other priorities like climate action and other things that we might incentivize as part of this program. So I would also like to see that be an opportunity.
Yeah, I would like to just say that I agree with Tim on that. And the National Trust for Historic Preservation has a mantra that the greenest building is one that's already built. So if you can keep those buildings and maintain the integrity, you are being better for the planet than if you demolish them and build new. But you have to be able to maintain them and do things that will improve that situation.
Dylan, you have anything want to add or comment on?
I think that going through this process has really shown me that there is great potential for development in kind of our city center area. And I agree with the sentiments that have already been discussed. I'm not sure that the facade grant program is driving economic development or development in the downtown. It seems like it's a response to a project that may already be underway. And so if the council's objective is to encourage additional development, considering other programs that come closer to hitting that target would be a good path to consider.
Rich, anything you want to add? You're good? Just want to comment that there was very well written reports from both of you. Thank you. And lots of good suggestions. This report would seem to be a lot broader than just this first item, but I do commend council for really focusing on your letter from August 12th of last year, actually,
Yes.
where you said something to the effect that a lot of development will occur, more development will occur if we can basically disconnect. I'll use that word. Can you comment on just other parts of the report and maybe where you're at in terms of doing a master plan or envisioning? Because I think that one thing that I think council might be interested in is how do some of these things tie in with a bigger vision versus just going after different pieces. Now I'm talking about something different than
Sure.
they were just talking about.
Well, thank you for that question. So I think the word that comes to my mind is opportunity. And so what I tried to do in my report, staff was very detailed in kind of expressing the nuances of the feedback that we've gotten. What I tried to do with my report was to give kind of an overall, an overarching vision or highlights of the things that I took from feedback, both in our sessions that we held formally and in conversations with stakeholders and the Main Street organization outside of those meetings, and tried to characterize them in three different categories that I think cover the opportunity. So those categories are detailed in there as support, flexibility, and vision. And so, Mayor Haley, what you were referring to there was a kind of a vision looking at the opportunities that exist in our downtown area and kind of expanding what that looks like, maybe thinking about the plans that we have for specific areas in the downtown and thinking about how they could work together. Just an intentionality. And this is a great map here that Kelly has brought up. Support, I think that there's opportunity and a willingness for collaboration, more collaboration between the city, the economic development organizations, Main Street, and developers and business owners to carry out that vision through a collaborative effort. And then just a few suggestions for additional opportunities for flexibility, particularly when it comes to working with the old building stock the building stock that we have in this area, and with a vision of maintaining the contributing historic properties to keep them as an attraction for generations to come. I think there's an opportunity to look at some flexibility just within this district, this area, to encourage folks to invest their dollars.
Okay. All right, we'll open up public comment. Does anyone in the audience that wants to address council and offer input on the topic? If you would, just introduce yourself and try and limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. I'd appreciate it. Hi, Sam.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Stagg. I'm the president of Ames Downtown, or Ames Main Street. And so first of all, just want to say thank you for taking the time in your busy schedules in terms of the council agenda, as well as the city staff as well, for the time they've committed to helping Main Street and the downtown district assess issues, even offer a little bit of critique for some of the programs. And so Dylan and I have been working hard to draft this report and offer some feedback. and are really excited about the vision and the potential for the development of downtown. And so tonight was a great start into thinking through how that can be improved upon. So thank you for that. But also to maybe, Mr. Mayor, to answer your question, there's been some really great discussion on some both, I'll call it maybe micro vision as well as some macro vision for downtown. We've, in recent past, we've talked about the next big thing for Ames Main Street. And so we're working with a couple of local designers, and we'll be in front of the council again and to offer some ideas on some streetscapes design for Main Street, as well as how that the micro aspect of Main Street can connect with a larger vision for, we're coining the term city center, and which includes downtown, the area noted on the map, but also a handful of other nearby zones or districts that are ripe for development, both for public as well as private development. So we're continuing to work, like I said, on both a micro and macro scale to really promote the development and redevelopment of Main Street and downtown. So once again, thank you for the time. We'll continue to work hard, and you'll see us again.
Well, normally we don't ask questions if people offer public comment, but I do have a question for you, Sam.
Sure,
If you
you
could,
bet.
one, I appreciate all the work you guys are doing. I know it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time, and it was good to see you had like 140 some people that did the survey. Just curious, there's a lot of people that shop in downtown. There's a lot of businesses, and as you're aware, we've had sometimes some run-ins with people when something's trying to be changed, a la parking meter, raised. So what is the process you're going through to get all stakeholders, whether they're part of Ames Main Street or not, engaged in the conversation? Because in your report, you talk about some cool ideas, but I just immediately, I think some of us thought, is everyone buying into those? Because the point is that how do you build consensus or get most people to buy in and be excited about it? That's the first question. And secondly is micro vision and macro are great, but how do you make sure that the micro vision coalesces with the macro vision? So, and that's actually predates, I believe, a lot of us on council. Stuff would be, we want to do this, and then all of a sudden, oops, we want to do this, or oops, this has got to be changed. So we can all be pulling the plow the same direction and really be successful. So maybe can you just talk about the soliciting input, buy-in, feedback, and also you have customers.
Right.
People that are coming in and shopping, people that are working downtown, whatever. So
Yeah, great questions, John. So to answer the first one, so the first two meetings that we had regarding this particular issue, we had some great feedback. Some, I'll call it maybe negative, but kind of rolling back the clock a little bit further when we were having discussions about the self-sustaining taxing district, the SMID district. We held a couple of very public and somewhat well-attended meetings to get feedback from local stakeholders, business owners, property owners. And we were on a track to offer and report and petition the council for the instigation of the SMID district. However, because of some of that negative feedback, particularly about what are those specific ideas and how they're going to be funded, or what was the cost of those, we didn't have enough things prepared in order to answer some of those direct questions, to answer some of that negative feedback, which is okay. We pumped the brakes and said, okay, we're going to put some more time and effort into developing some specific plans, ideas, working with all of you and city staff on what those could be. And that's where I was referring to earlier, we're getting a couple design firms to offer some proposals to help us with some envisioning and some design work to be able to answer some of those negative critiques, or the question that, if I could summarize what the question was, okay, what specifically are you planning on doing? There's some cool ideas, but where does the rubber hit the road? And so that's what we've been working on. So we're excited to continue to work on that. You'll see more of that in the future.
Can I add before you go to the next question?
Yeah.
So I think really we're talking about maybe two, the streetscapes and downtown vision is maybe a part or a piece of a larger vision that I think has yet to be imagined. So I think the what we were trying to identify is that if you look at downtown as it's detailed on this map here that's on the slide, the opportunities are a lot smaller than if you pan out a little bit and look at the amenities that are either in place or being put in place currently. We've got the Schenker Plaza that's coming in here. This is part of that map, but what that doesn't include is the indoor aquatic center and opportunities that may be available on the south side of Lincoln Way. And so we've got a grocery store that is not included in that map. And so when you look at it too narrowly, the amenities that are already in place to support a robust downtown that will encourage not only people to come and spend their retail dollars, but also to live downtown, to invest in putting their businesses downtown. The picture needs to be looked at more holistically. And so I think the plan that Sam is talking about is just a piece of a larger potential vision. And we haven't gotten to the point of soliciting stakeholder input on that. I think that's a vision that has yet to be fleshed out.
And we've introduced some of these ideas with Kelly and Benjamin, and that deserves and warrants more visits with these folks and city council as well as some zoning discussions that have been talked about. And so that segues into the answering of your second question, John, of being able to utilize resources that are already in place, zoning districts that are already in place, but then just making sure that the small element of downtown of Main Street is influencing some of these other potential developments, but also other developments that can help influence what Main Street is doing. And so it's a difficult process, and we're still in the early stages of crafting that vision, both on a micro and macro level. But we're excited because there has been some interest in both in some private developers and what this could look like, both once again on a small scale and a larger scale.
Well, again, thank you for your efforts, and I think this is a tremendous opportunity to try and bring and coalesce, the community, around this, because it's really our community's area, not just one or two or a handful of business owners or
That's
whatever. Not that you are saying that, you're not saying that, but anyway, it's just how can we look for like I said, the opportunity to really turn this into to build consensus so that there's excitement going forward. And no, everyone's not going to agree. If it is, I'd be shocked. But
Right.
But it'd be wonderful if we get a large portion of people to be buying in, and they feel like that at least they've been heard, and you're trying to work with them.
That's right. It's that collaborative effort that we think is really going to be a catalyst for success for a project like this, and as a starting point, but also for future work, right? The city, organizations like Main Street, Iowa State, private developers, public development, things like that. So it's that collaborative effort that we think is going to be the catalyst for success. So I appreciate your comments, John.
Thanks, Sam.
Are you still, I guess I should rephrase that. Is there still a faculty member from Community and Regional Planning connected with the Main Street Board, or has that gone away?
So Brian Phillips sits in on the Main Street Board as a representative from the city, so assistant city manager. But in terms of specific planning representative,
I mean, from Iowa State.
Oh, from
Community
Iowa
and
State.
Regional Planning Department
Oh.
at Iowa State. There used to be Susan, what's her name? What is it? Bradbury.
Right.
I was going to say Bradshaw, and I knew that was wrong. Is there still a connection to that program?
Not specifically, no. There is an open seat still on the board for an Iowa State liaison of some sort. We've opened that and broadened that seat in terms of who we're targeting a little bit more, just to attract some other folks, as opposed to just someone on the CRP board or faculty. But great question. That would be a good. We've understood that to be a good element or chair to fill. Once again, offering that additional arm of collaborative effort in that realm of the city and the community. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks, Sam.
Great. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment. All right, Kelly, I think that if you can go back to slide, yeah, that one.
I'm going to make you
Just
start
sit-
here.
Pardon me?
I'm going to make you start here.
No, I was asking you to go
Okay.
back to slide 3. So,
Can I ask one other question about a different element? And I don't know that this is a question for Rich or for Kelly, but on page 12 of the staff report, there's a note about the, I guess it's specifically about the existing building code, where it says it may be beneficial to gain a greater understanding of the design options available and to have an educational session with designers, owners, and architects. Then that came right after the discussion of inspections and the ways in which code is being applied. And I'm just wondering if you could flesh out what that education component is, and is it connected to the grant, or is this seen as a separate issue that's going to help with some of the problems that people noted?
These, in my opinion, these comments about codes and permitting had nothing to do with the facade grant. They were all about projects that people wanted to do, whether there was city money in them or not. So then, can you restate your question one more time for the other part of it?
Well, you sort of answered it,
Okay.
but I mean, is that educational component related to the codes, like the existing building code or the, I don't know, fire code, or is it related to other things as well? It was in that section, so.
Yeah, I think it's definitely related to outreach for people to understand where we have some opportunities to move. And I think Kelly did a good job laying that out. In the zoning code, we have opportunities for some movement. But when it comes to building codes, specifically electrical, plumbing, mechanical, when it comes to fire codes, we're subservient to the state. So we can't be less restrictive than the state. And sometimes our customers don't always know that limitation. We also have ADA requirements that we don't enforce, but we make sure our customers are aware of the ADA requirements and then the implications if they don't, the civil liability that's there. So talking with our building official, Sarah, we think that using the existing building code that we have available would be a good opportunity if we could do some outreach with customers in the downtown area, developers, architects, and just go through that process because it's a worksheet. The fire code is prescriptive. So is the building code. It tells you what you need to do and how you need to do it. Where the existing building code says, hey, you have some opportunities. If you sprinkle your building, you have more opportunities to have more residents there or to do an assembly. If you have fire protective corridors, maybe you don't have to do sprinklers. And so that's what we really want to do is that outreach to know that we see the code not as a limitation, but as an opportunity to make sure that we're keeping people safe. There's also the added benefit of when you do some of these measures to your building that we're seeing reduced insurance rates for people. And reaching out to our friends over in Bloomington, Indiana, I spoke with them today. And that's one of the big benefits they've seen for their downtown customers of doing some of these code updates is they've been able to reduce some of the insurance rate for their downtown area, which we know Bloomington has a gorgeous downtown area. So.
just for
on the-
clarification, to just make us highlight, existing building code is indeed a building code document that is different than, or it's modified from the true building code. Maybe you can explain the nuances on that, because it really is a very effective tool that could be used recognizing some of the issues. Maybe just highlight that a little bit, because somebody say, well, the existing building code, well, you mean the one that's already in existence right now, or what are you talking about? So
Yeah, absolutely. That could be confusing. And that's one thing in talking with other fire chiefs across the state, because everyone is trying to make their downtown a viable place. We see the value in that. So what they're dealing with is just you really got to follow the international existing building code when it comes to changing the occupancy type of existing buildings. You don't go back and forth. So normally if you're building in Ames, a new building, we follow the IBC International Building Code. When you have an existing building, hence the name, the International Existing Building Code, that's what you follow, and you go through the worksheet So they're independent of each other. They don't work together. They're independent when you're working with an existing building. And that's what it was designed for, was to take advantage of some of the limitations that those buildings have, trying to protect some of that historic, some of that architecture that's there, preserving that, but also adding the safety value of, hey, we understand things built in the 50s and 60s maybe didn't have the same safety or design elements that are available to us today.
So Rich, I want to dovetail it. So we have the issue of the code. We also have issues of the inspection process and the approval process. Could you give us a sense? Do you think we're where we should be in terms of consistency in the way in which our building inspectors are working with contractors? We've all received feedback from contractors that express concerns that we have the rules, but then we actually have the enforcement. There's areas that are black and white, but there are areas that are gray and that are open to interpretation. Could you give us your assessment? Are we where we should be on consistency? Maybe that's what I'm trying to strive for.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really important to our office. In fact, that's the weekly meetings we have. That's what we're discussing is consistency when we go out. And where we get a lot of feedback from customers and those opportunities that we have is when we bring in a new inspector. So when you change from somebody that's been your plumbing inspector for 30 years and then you bring in somebody new, their slant on the code is perhaps just a little bit different. And so there's a huge educational component for Sarah and Scott and the inspection office to make sure that our inspections know that when they're going out inspecting work, it's not what they would do if they were in the trade. It's do they meet the minimum? Let me stress that again, the minimum of the code requirement. It's not what you would do if you were the plumber. It's are they meeting the code? We also have a nice feature in our code, the code modification process. So that's something where working with our contractors, if they see the code differently or feel like we're interpreting it incorrectly, that they can do a code modification request, what allows, and Sarah does this, Sarah actually works with the customer to write it out to make sure that we're addressing it appropriately. We go through the appeals process and allow the applicant to explain how they see the code, how that differs for what our interpretation is, and then the board gets to have a ruling on that. And there's been times where it's been upheld, and then there's been other times where we didn't see it correctly, the code, or it was interpreted a little bit differently. We also do a lot of outreach. So we're not the only building department in the state of Iowa. So we have IABO, which is the Iowa Building Officials group that we reach out to. We also have the International Code Council that we reach out to make sure that we're interpreting the code. So are there opportunities to be more consistent? Always. That's what we strive for our customers. We want them to know what to expect when they're building here, especially if they come from Johnston to Ames or go down to Des Moines. We want that consistency. So that's why we reach out to other communities to make sure that our code isn't doing something special in Ames that Des Moines isn't doing.
So going back to that issue of education, am I hearing that really there are two different kinds of education? There's internal education to make sure that the inspection staff is all interpreting the code in a consistent way. And there's maybe a component that isn't as fleshed out at this point, which is some sort of outreach education for building professionals of various sorts, architects, developers, contractors, that we could be enhancing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we did, if you recall, a few years ago, we did a presentation, Sarah and I did, on the existing building code to work through that process because it's not used a whole lot. I think it's pretty intimidating when people want to start using that process. And so that's what the outreach we want to do with the worksheet is go through that process, a preliminary review to help give them some feedback of what that process looks like to help eliminate some of the intimidation of it. Now, it does take going through that process. It is somebody that needs to be licensed as an engineer, as an architect, because there are features in there. What's the difference between a 1 hour fire rated corridor versus a 2 hour? That most of us that want to develop a downtown area don't have that expertise. So that's where we really count on somebody with a license to do that. So we're hoping we can team up and we can do some outreach. Maybe we can do some workshops to explain that process to developers, to people in the downtown area. So that's less intimidating, so that maybe they can pursue some of these options that are out there to work through the existing building code that maybe they didn't think were possible.
And I have one last question, and this relates to implementation. If we decide we want to do something different with our grant program or an abatement program, do we have to link the abatement or the grant to an individual property? Or can that sort of thing be linked to a region? So there might be a solution, for example, let's say we got to the point where we said we want to incentivize ADA compliant buildings in our historic downtown. And council has approved that as something that we want to fund. I know in the past there was discussion of creating an elevator block on the back of some of those Main Street buildings that could serve multiple buildings, but it wasn't going to be a one property solution. It was going to involve partners. Is that something that we can do, or do we have to link our abatement or our grant program to a specific property and that owner? Maybe can it be linked to an LLC, or I don't know.
I mean, the short answer would be no, it doesn't have to be linked. Ultimately, tax abatement is filed and requested by individual property owners. So ultimately, a property owner has to ask for it. It doesn't just fall in your lap. But from a facade grant, they don't need to be tied together. And if the city council wants to create a program that you have, I mean, ultimately, they all have to agree to it, right? So there's no way you could do a multi-property project without them already agreeing. So I don't think there's really a distinction there, but technically the answer would be no.
Okay, Kelly, take us through the.
So yeah, with the original referral, my understanding was originally for sure consensus to broaden the options. It lets the owner decide what's more valuable to them, 100% at the beginning or a sliding scale over 10 years. And it kind of depends on how long you want to hold the building and some other assumptions. And that puts everybody on par with other programs in the city. So I just need that to be confirmed if that's your interest. And then the other 3 bullets at the bottom, that's where I really need direction, because all of those would be changes in regards to eligibility criteria that already exist. So
we can go ahead and our council can go ahead and have 2 motions here. One would be the your first bullet, round bullet, I'll call it. And then the second one could be, or do you want to have them tied together?
I can do multiple motions. That's fine.
All right. Is there a motion regarding 3, 5, and 10 year schedule, tax abatement schedule?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
So with that, we're saying that you would have the choice.
Yeah, so if nothing else changed, now you can choose when you file for abatement and you get a one-time choice, 3, 5, or 10, instead of just only 3 right now.
Which would put it in line with all the other URAs in the city.
So there's one it's an administrative thing. When the state changed a whole bunch of stuff with taxes and everything last year, they did now require any new commercial abatement to file a minimum assessment agreement. So it's not that it's a criteria, but it's an extra step that any commercial property owner is going to have to do to come into Sherry and verify that they actually have increased value. It's always been a standard that you do increase value. You have to increase it by at least 5% to be eligible. But this would hold you to a minimum assessment agreement for the length of whatever schedule you pick. It's not a big deal. It's just extra things you have to do at the end.
This will come back to council in form of.
Yeah, so we have to go through an ordinance. A URA is adopted with an ordinance and a resolution. So we'll have to come back for some formal action.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right. I guess the other 3 bullets at the end are kind of tied together, so to speak, or not tied together, but basically give you options. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can do any or all of those 3, or none.
I'd like to move that we not incentivize demolition of historic resources and that we use the downtown historic district criteria as what determines a historic property.
The already designated contributing resources, not the criteria.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so in your report, there's a map of the historic district on page 29. So with Gloria's motion, the dark gray properties, if you were to demolish one of those buildings, no matter what you put back, you would not be eligible for tax abatement.
That is my motion, although I'd like to have it encompass not just that historic district, but if we had any other historic districts downtown that emerged, that the same would be true for them. So,
So, I mean, we'd probably write it then to say that any property that has an identified contributing resource within a national historic district would be ineligible for tax abatement if demolished. So then it's just broad. It's not the Main Street one. It's just any national.
yes, but I
district.
would say maybe you don't want to say national because it could be a local district. I'm not going to rule that out. Not likely, but it'd be a historic district.
All right.
Good.
Well, I'll
Does that
work
make a
through what I
difference?
need to do based on what gets passed. Yeah. Because we don't. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want me to rephrase
Is there a
that?
second? Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
So there would be no exception process. Let's say if a building was largely destroyed by a fire or something,
So if
it couldn't be demolished and.
So it's already, if it naturally loses its integrity, meaning through a accidental fire, it would no longer be an eligible property. So I don't, by the way historic review works, I think it just would no longer be contributing because it's lost integrity because of unintentional damage.
What if it just deteriorates to the point that
Well,
it's so
then I
terrible?
would say that shouldn't be eligible because then you're incenting neglect. And that's the most common complaint about historic.
Well, I was
districts is
thinking like if a
neglect.
building becomes so poorly and then someone, maybe it goes into foreclosure and then someone else purchases it or something. I mean, I could think of all sorts of circumstances.
I think as soon as you create a carve out, people will find a way to take advantage of it to get to the incentive without getting what maybe you desired as your program. And then, so URAs are a unit, the way the state law sets these up, it's a uniform criteria. It is not a case by case evaluation. So it is the same rule for everybody. There's no council, well, this will work this time, but we don't want to do it again. It's not allowed in state law. It's uniform.
I would respectfully suggest that there are some buildings that are in really bad repair. And to have a one-size-fits-all rule is really sort of out of touch with the status of our downtown. There's a sort of a similar situation going with Old Town. So it's very difficult to make improvements in our Old Town area. Well, guess what's happening? Our Old Town area is really declining. So we can sort of hold on to these aspirational goals of maintaining these history things, but the problem is gravity continues its effect. And so I'm going to vote against this motion because I don't think it's consistent with our goals for the city as a whole.
All right, you understand the motion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carried 4-2. All right, how about tax abatement being connected to required as a precedent, or the exterior facade grant improvements required in order to qualify for tax abatement? I thought I heard comments made about disconnecting.
Yeah, I would move that tax abatement should not be tied to exterior improvement.
Facade. Is that-
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the words up there, but it should not be tied to
New exterior.
facade grant improvements or existing compliant historic facade design. How's that?
Second.
So you're basically picking the last part, no exterior improvement at all. So that would mean that you can do anything to that property in any way you want to, and you are going to get an incentive from the city for that action. You could resurface the whole building. You could do something amazing on the inside. You could resurface the outside and anything you want. You could close up all the windows. Like that is what that gets, is it opens it up for people doing great project. It also doesn't stop anybody from doing a bad project. So
Okay, I'm going to withdraw my motion then, because that's not how I interpreted that.
that's why I wanted to state that, because I think the last one is just physical improvements are not required. It's really based on that you're making an investment in that property of any type.
So do you have a suggested, hearing what council has talked about tonight, do you have any kind of suggestions on how to accomplish a decoupling of the tax abatement from the facade improvements?
I guess maybe you want to answer the second bullet first. If you're really just interested in specific uses, being able to take advantage of tax abatement regardless of the condition of the building, then you would pick the second bullet. And if that's the case, I probably have less concern about broadly buildings being altered, because only 3 types of users are going to be able to take advantage of that abatement. But I don't know that I've heard a lot of opinion about what council's goal is for the tax abatement program right now, other than to make it more usable for people. But I'm not sure what your other goals are for the program, to give you another option.
I guess what I was thinking there is that I wanted us to provide abatement for maintenance activities for buildings that are going to increase their structural integrity in the historic district, but that buildings that are not in that historic district, as far as I'm concerned, we could be incentivizing other things because we don't have design guidelines outside the historic district. So I guess the question is, are we talking about that broader definition of downtown, or are we just talking about the historic district?
So for me, on this slide, I am talking about the existing boundary
That's on.
of downtown. That's that black
Page
line, or I
9.
can go to this one. The black line is the current urban revite area. We have not discussed broadening out the tax abatement geography at all. So I think if I understood what you were trying to include as eligible, that might be a better approach than saying, what should I remove from the criteria? So if we're saying we want to let fire sprinkler investments, we want to let people that do other improvements internal to the building be eligible, we can work with that. I guess then the question is, do you want to safeguard any exterior changes that you think would be unacceptable?
As far as external changes, I would say changes in the historic district that remove historic elements.
Character defining features again.
But I don't really care about the rest of the area because we don't have definitions, we don't have design guidelines for the rest of that downtown area.
But aren't we already having issues with people not being able to meet the facade grant guidelines because the historic designations for materials or windows or whatnot?
I don't see it that way. I mean, our facade guidelines are not actually reinforcing the historic district. They're about creating a storefront with transparency at street level, really kind of just making a modern traditional storefront. We want transoms when they're there to be like the way historic buildings were, but you're not forced to do a transom if you didn't have one. Most buildings are brick, so most people are working with brick when they're doing modifications. I guess I don't have enough direct experience of people saying you are creating a hurdle I can't get over with your facade grant program. And it pre-existed the historic district.
I could see some of those buildings down there not wanting to fix their facades, not wanting to, go in and remove things that have been installed over the years, but perhaps having the need to tuck point the outside of their building in order to maintain the structural integrity. which is not really changing the look of the building. It's a maintenance activity that's designed to keep the building standing. So the historic buildings may need tuck pointing. The other buildings may need tuck pointing. I don't want to say, gosh, if you want that tuck pointing, you have to have the facade redone.
Okay, so I
I'm-
understand that. So if we're trying, I think that's the path we need to keep going down. So I understand what you're trying to allow. I think it's just the question of is, and we might have to work on this and bring it back to you. Is there some kind of common agreement about what detrimental exterior work we don't want to incent as the city? I think that's what we're trying to make sure we're not incenting something none of us are going to be happy with, and you gave money for that to happen. I think what you're talking about is easy to write in as eligible. It's just making sure we don't encourage something we don't want.
And do those items end up increasing their assessed value?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, that's just
And
the
so
point.
that's-
But that's not our call. So if you do maintenance for tuck pointing on your building, you probably did not increase the value of your building. Highly unlikely, because that's just maintenance.
And
Now,
that's-
if active maintenance creates new space, makes more usable space, and improves the finishes on the interior, then yeah, you're probably increasing the value, and your taxes may go up. And then that would be a partial abatement.
So, but if we've saved them some money doing something structural, then maybe they have the money to do the tuck pointing. And so perhaps it's still a win.
Maybe. I also am not wedded to the idea of this being only exterior, because sprinkler systems are interior. And
Yeah, I heard your comments as being any improvement to the building, whether it's structural, whether it's interior remodel, whether it's a fire sprinkler, anything that could be an investment that improves the usability of the building.
So are we talking, I'm sensing this interface between grants and tax abatement. And I think we're talking about tax abatement right now.
What
but then
tax abatement
grant-
only.
Right.
So right now, it's whether you can apply for tax abatement at the end of your project, regardless of a facade
Right.
grant.
So to your point you just made, Anita, is that like tuck pointing, fire sprinklers, general maintenance may not do much in terms of increasing the value, the assessed value, because really the tax abatement is just on the new increased value over and above what is currently taxed at. Is that correct?
Yes.
Kelly?
So
Yeah. You know, Dylan, you're sitting here at the table, and you're the one that we can blame you for this. No, you wrote the letter in August. Even though you're not staff, you're there at the table, so you've heard a conversation and understand the dilemma. Do you have any comments you want to make?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to give a little bit of context to what the project that originated this discussion, the letter. So we had a project in the downtown that was targeting the Ames Tribune building, and they would make this project would have made a significant. It has since no, it's no longer a project, but I think the core of the issue still is relevant. They would have made a significant investment on the interior of the building to currently. It's just a shell of a building, and they would have made a significant investment that would have added an entertainment venue and restaurant to the downtown, which I think is probably within the targeted goals of the council of something that would want to be incented. But the building is not would not have. And Benjamin, maybe you can correct me on the terminology of this, but was not eligible for a facade grant because it was already compliant?
Correct. Basically, nothing had changed about it, so there was nothing to improve.
Right. So then that project, because of the nature of the facade grant being tied to the tax abatement program, was ineligible to be incented for tax abatement due to the structure of the program.
So you're not staff, but I think we have the same goals. Do you have any suggestions on how to accomplish, or any input on how to accomplish, not basically having some, and not that you're going to have some architect going to come in and basically close all the windows and paint the front black, and call it good essentially. But I'm just curious. I think that is, it's that your wrinkle was a new aha moment, at least for me tonight, thinking, oh my gosh, I can see, because really the goal is you have a beautiful downtown and you want to try and maintain it.
I think that was clear in the comments. Everybody's like, the downtown character, the historic character is critical. We're not trying to redevelop the big R downtown, right? We're trying to reinvest in downtown. Sometimes that might mean a new building, but in general, it's about reinvesting. So I just want to make sure, I think we all understand generally what we want to do. It's just making sure the actual program really doesn't have that unintended consequence. I'll steal Tim's line there. And I'm a little concerned if you remove, I think our biggest problem is the zoning has no standards for exterior look. So you could remove tax abatement from an aesthetic requirement, and you could revisit zoning and say, is there enough backstops that we could add to zoning where then we don't have to worry about it from a tax abatement program? We could add the window requirement. We could add a materiality requirement to zoning. So Campus Town has a few of those backstops. Its tax abatement programs goes way further though. Campus Town has way more prescriptive design requirements, safety requirements. A whole host of things are in the Campus Town one that are not here. And I don't think we need to go that far. But just to say, you have a lot different programs in Campus Town than you do here.
But I think that's a good model. The phrase I would use is limiting principles. So I think it seems like there's enough to go on and let the staff work on developing limiting principles and come back and we can kick the ball around a bit more.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that. I would agree. We talked about this for almost an hour and a half tonight. I think we're not going to get through all these nuances. So if you want to make a motion to.
So let me just point out one thing. The difference approach though, Kelly, is if you put it in the zoning ordinance, and every project has to meet it. We're just trying to do it now, give you freedom. If you want to incentivize, you can ask something in return. So and be careful. If you put in the zoning ordinance that all projects won't have the owners won't have an option. They'll have to do it.
Yeah.
Understand the distinction?
Yeah. And I'm not sure that's what we're trying to accomplish.
I'm just pointing out, you might want, some cities do that. You could look at Pella and other places, but I'm not sure that's what you're looking for. We were trying to not dictate it, but if you wanted to get the incentive, you would do certain things. Now, maybe the limited criteria is for eligibility for the incentive. You could do it that way.
I think what's really, when you kind of dig through all of the comments, you had some internal inconsistencies because you had everybody agree historic character is great. And then they said, I don't like that other people are doing these things inconsistent with it, but make sure I get flexibility to do mine the way I think it should be done. So we had a big picture agreement. And then that common thing that you deal with is one person thinks it should be done one way and another should be done the other way. And then how are we trying to be consistent, or how are we as the city trying to have an overarching consistent goal? I think if council endorses Gloria's idea of let's expand what's eligible, and then within what Tim said, can staff put some brackets on that? I think we have a sense of what you're trying to get to. I just don't have a great answer for you tonight.
Right.
I think we have to think about that and give you some choices there.
Can I add one more piece of this? So I mentioned the idea of thinking about a factor for climate action goals and how energy efficiency, I would like to incentivize energy efficiency. Is that something that you have tools in the toolbox that you could give us to look at as part of a proposal?
We have not explored that issue specifically to talk about what resources are available to that. So we would probably have to come back to you and talk about that, because it wouldn't be, whatever we come up for downtown would be probably similar to anywhere in the city. There's not really unique programs or funding for downtown related to efficiency.
What was the question?
So I'm asking a question. If we're thinking about incentivizing these kinds of remodeling projects, could energy efficiency be one of the criteria, one of the factors that we're trying to incentivize?
Certainly.
So, I mean, I'm happy to make that as a separate motion.
Okay, so yeah, I want to draw this to close. Let's just go ahead and have a motion, a high level motion, give us some direction to staff and where we want to go, and then we're going to basically be done with this item, tonight.
So is it enough for me to say I move that staff come back to us with language that expands the opportunity for tax abatement to interior and exterior projects with limiting guidelines?
I'll
Does that
second.
work?
I think he's,
I would second that.
It's an or though, isn't it? You can have independently just interior improvements.
Mhm.
You don't have to do both.
everyone understand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Tim, do you want to make a separate motion? before
Sure.
we close?
I would ask that staff come back to us with proposals of how we could integrate energy efficiency as a component for the approved renovations.
You just made it part of the eligibility requirement. The project has to have that component in it to qualify for the tax abatement, right?
Correct.
All right. Well, are you saying it's mandatory to get it, or you just want to make if they do the energy efficiency improvement, it would also be eligible?
No,
The latter.
Second.
I thought you wanted to mandate it now.
So I'm cautious.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, seconded. All right, go ahead.
And those are things that can be fleshed out by staff when they bring it back to us. We can be more heavy-handed. We can more see what comes with. I guess I'd like to give architects and engineers flexibility in terms of how they go about this.
And it may be one of those things that doesn't actually add value to. So there's things there that we need to look at. Like if you install solar, the way state code's written, it doesn't increase the value of your home because there's an exclusion of the value of the solar. So it doesn't increase your taxes when you install it. So there's just different things in here that we have to dig into it a little bit further.
But so for example, windows are a short list item. The developer may make different decisions on improving the energy efficiency of the windows that they wouldn't otherwise make. So that would be, I'd like to give more choices.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
So if I could just get it all tied up, the one about uses, is there any interest about targeting specific uses or not?
May I suggest that you bring that back as some options? There are some things you could bring in as part of your report back again.
Okay.
Unless council has a very strong opinion one way or the other, I just think that
I think we've narrowed it down to either it includes retail, residential, and or restaurant entertainment. And it's those one or all of those three things is really the only question that's left. And that would be in it with where you went. So there, I guess residential is the key one because right now residential is precluded. So with the direction that you gave to kind of expand activities that might be eligible and decouple it a little bit from the facade grant, I guess the question is, should residential be an eligible use?
I would absolutely want to add residential.
All right, is there a motion?
Yes, I would move that we add residential to eligible uses.
Second.
Okay. Since that's been opened up, do you want to include anything else regarding other uses in terms of focusing on that? He has on retail, restaurant, residential. Is there anything else you want to add to the motion to capture all this since he asked the question?
So if we prioritize retail, restaurant / entertainment and residential, that really only leaves out
Office.
personal services and office. Am I correct?
Yeah. I guess based on what Gloria asked for, right? It's a pretty broad, now every building with
Right.
is eligible for a lot of different activities. And do you want to bring that back into specific uses? The only question. Residential is additive because it's prohibited right now.
Right.
And even right now, new office is not eligible. Existing office, if you do a facade grant, is eligible for abatement, but you can't get a new office building built that doesn't have retail on the ground floor
Right.
and be eligible. So really, your motion would just add residential as an eligible abatement activity and then keep all the
And
other stuff
everything
the
else
same.
would- I'm going to keep that in my motion.
Okay.
So you asked the question, do you want to focus on retail, restaurant, or any other uses? Are you saying it's already present in the?
I'm saying the current structure allows for any retail, any trade, any entertainment use
Okay.
to be eligible, whether it's existing or new construction.
Okay.
Residential was not allowed. Under Amber's motion, it would now become eligible.
So that's your answer to your question.
That answers that part. And if there's no other activity, no new office or new personal service would be eligible. Existing buildings that do work would be eligible, whether they had an office use or
Okay.
not.
All right. Everyone stand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. All right.
So
Go ahead, Amber.
I know you want to move on, I'm sorry, but I want to make sure we don't lose sight of some of the other items in this report. So I just am trying to figure out what you, Mayor, might recommend for us to continue these discussions.
It's very unhygienic, but you took my words right out of my mouth because that was what I was going to say next.
Okay,
is that
sorry.
It's a good point, and that is, I trust this is only the beginning of a conversation and dialogue on this, and so I was going to ask Kelly what he would suggest to go ahead and weed this in and keep this going. I mean, obviously, you got Main Street's got some visioning. Sam used micro visioning, macro visioning going on, some consultants as well too. There's a lot of stuff swirling on there. Do you see that tying in with your 3-page report, or
No.
I'm not asking you to tell us what to do. I'm just asking in terms of how that all merges together. Essentially, there's a lot of material
Yes.
there.
Yeah, I
How's
guess.
that concise?
I guess for me, my specific question is, and I sort of set the visioning piece aside because I think that's obviously a very long-term thing and it's being driven by Main Street. And I think that's a good thing and probably more effective, if I'm being honest. I guess I'm wondering in the support / flexibility categories, are there high priority issues, items that we should be putting back on the agenda to discuss in more detail?
So Amber, your initial direction for us to seek feedback from stakeholders in the downtown was for the question of, are there any barriers or roadblocks to development? And so I think there are lots of things that were covered both in the staff report and in the report that I generated that covers and details some of those things. And I think it would be great to continue discussion on some of those. I think there are some low-hanging fruit for things that could be done to mitigate some of those things, but I think it requires some more discussion.
Seems like one of the things that we're probably going to have to come back to is whether we fund the facade program at a higher value simply because of rising costs. But that's a separate issue from the abatement program now.
Well, and to be fair, you were going to pull building improvement and maintenance concept away from facade programs too, right? The original conversation before we got into the details was to think of building improvements that are not facades separately from facade program. So that's really a whole new program.
Yes.
Not just a change of the budget to the downtown facade program.
No, that's a separate issue.
Yes.
But the funding is still, I think, an issue as well.
So I think just kind of looking at Steve, budget season starts now. So if you're looking at programs, I think if you need feedback from us to understand how you might begin to look at the budget in January for different programs, whether it's to change the facade program, whether it's to add another kind of program, we probably need to be coming back to you with some information about.
Well, yeah, you need to look at these holistically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of others. There's another group talking about housing and money there, and there may be other groups. That's why you handle all this at budget time. There's only so much money out of those pots, and you're gonna have to prioritize. So I think we're gonna have to think about it. Just this isn't the only request that's coming before you and worthy of your consideration either. So
That's why I'm not moving that we start discussing that now.
So
next name is a lot easier.
Go ahead.
aside from the things that require budget considerations, I guess I would make a motion that we put back on a future agenda just specifically the items in the support and flexibility categories and leave the visioning piece out for now.
You're
And that,
referring to the report from
yes, the downtown report. And that we discuss those individual items.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
One question I have in this, I was going to be making a motion to look at the process. I'd like to extricate council from this process. I think it should be done, this kind of thing should be done on a staff level.
The facade grant process.
Yes.
Yeah.
But is that encompassed within this this section, or is that something different?
I mean, I guess you could, it's not specifically called out in here, no. You could probably put it under the flexibility category, but no, it's not specifically mentioned.
You understand the motion? What was
I can
referring
just make
to?
a second motion.
Okay.
Let's keep this clean.
All right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried.
Finally, I'd like to make a motion that we ask staff to bring us back options if the council wanted to delegate the approval process to staff, and also what an appeal process would look like.
For the abatement portion of it?
No,
No,
abatement can't be done by staff. It
On
has
the-
to go
on
to
the
council.
facade.
Facade part?
For facade grants.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Move seconded. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried.
Do we need a motion at all for Rich and the moving forward with the education activities? Or is that just something you're already planning to do?
It's something we're already planning to do, but if we will gladly entertain a motion as well.
I would move that inspections work to develop an enhanced education program for the International Existing Building Code and share that with stakeholders.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I might add, I think you need to be exposed to that too as a council. We're talking about flexibility, so.
We're stakeholders.
Okay, as long as you know, I think Rich and Sarah need to educate you too on what's possible. Are there other codes we could adopt in lieu of? You know, how can we become more flexible? What role do you play in this, if possible? So we want to educate you all too.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. Thank you, council. And we're going to move on to item number 22. Staff report on paving requirement for Cedar Lane related to the Ansley development.
Just want to make sure I have the map up. So Ansley development was a PUD and a preliminary plat that's been approved by city council. There's a segment of Cedar Lane that you can see that's apparently it's offset, but it should be on Cedar Lane, that red oval, which is an intervening section of Cedar Lane between the project's access points. And our subdivision code has a standard that access to a subdivision has to be paved. And through the rezoning and the preliminary plat process, Ansley had agreed to do this Cedar Lane improvement as the connection between its two driveways. As they've moved into the first phase of the project, they have decided that as they look at the project's build out and long-term, what its costs are, they're asking if city council would reconsider having to have that as a mandatory component of a future phase of the project. And we've outlined a few different options for you on how to look at that. If you're interested in granting their request or partially granting their request, there's different processes that could be applied to it to make that change. So I think we're looking for direction on how to proceed on if a change is desired and which type of change you would like to do.
Is there any thoughts in terms of precedent setting?
It's a little unusual, both in the way the site is situated. I don't think we have another example exactly of a project site. They would have an unimproved road between two entrances. This is not something we've commonly had for build out, so I can't point to a great example of that. At the same time, it is for the city to take over partial improvement costs. As we noted in here, Iowa State inherited an obligation to pay for half of the road. So it's not a full road improvement by us, but they are asking for you to take the developer's obligation away from them. And then ISU would maintain their others. There's not a lot of precedent either way to look at this.
So what's the timing on this in terms of when, if the council will decide to take that on, when does the obligation to put the road in occur? Like when they're doing their phase their blue phase down there at the far south end, or what's the trigger or toggle for that?
I think that it kind of depends on how you want to do it. If you want the city to kind of subsume their obligation, which is option 2, to kind of say you pay for the design, turn that over to us, and then we'll bid the project and carry it out, whether you're paying for all of it or taking a contribution from the developer, then you're going to have to program that in line with when they're doing improvements. If you chose option 1, which was essentially to just not require anything, then the city would do it at their discretion whenever the city wanted to do it, but it'd be a full cost on us to design the project and then bid the project.
No, but when's as soon as you're gonna have the second entrance in, which people would use?
It's really the third entrance, the southernmost
I keep saying
entrance.
second,
Yeah.
third, excuse me.
3
years?
I would say it's more than 3 years. Steve Steve Bergeson would probably have to comment on that, but my understanding is it's quite a ways down, literally
We
down the
wouldn't
road.
put that in probably any earlier.
Does this relate to our discussion of pioneer infrastructure?
Without it being well defined, my sense is not exactly, because it's not an improvement that's unlocking a large area of land that is yet to be developed. It's it's this oddball piece that's in between development phases. It's not like you're being asked to pave a half a mile road to get to a development site that has no access to the city. It's a little different in my eyes, but you haven't defined a policy around pioneer infrastructure or what would really warrant a city investment or incentive either.
Yeah, but it is unusual. Developers have said we've added cost to it. It's interesting. There are abutting properties to that could develop, right? But they may not develop for some time. When they do development, we would actually get the paving done.
Yeah, they all have a house on them now, so that's probably the biggest hang up here. Is it seems, well, maybe they could be divided. It seems unlikely they're going to be divided because they're previously developed parcels.
So it's unusual. That's probably not going to happen. So we're trying to pass it on to the developer to give a continuous paved road down to the third entrance. It's a bit unusual.
And what happens when that does occur? Is that Iowa State's advised that they have an obligation to pay the other half?
Yeah, the development agreement has a requirement for notification, and then they are required to make half of the improvement, which probably isn't physically possible. So they probably would contribute to the project, their share would be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really build half a road and have us build half a road. So most likely it's a joint project, or a joint project between ISU and the developer. Either way, I don't think ISU wants to build a road.
Mr. Bergeson was informed of this meeting, was he? Surprised he's not here.
Did we tell him? I believe we told him earlier in August that we would be looking at this tonight, but I'd not talked to Steve in the last week.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's not here to speak.
It's not pressing. If you want us to ensure that Steve has a chance to speak, you can table it to September. It doesn't impact their first phase of the project. This is about later phases of the project.
His request is that he not be required.
Correct.
Of course, the other option is allowed to stay gravel until the other properties develop, but that's probably not going to happen, and probably not what we want. Right?
I think so.
So we can wait until he gets here. You can make a decision.
I mean, one question I have, Kelly, just from a logistics perspective. This is sort of an unusual world from the standpoint that if you're on the north side, directions right here. Yeah, the north side. You only have to go down to this other, either Cedar Lane or this other internal road. I mean, it seems like we're working awfully hard for a road to connect north and south when there are other options very close. Any thoughts on that? How hard should we fight for this?
I think it's a question of if the developer does not do it, who will ever do it? So that's how so the subdivision code in general just says you have to have paved access to your subdivision. They have an access point that's unpaved. So that's what triggered the expectation. And if you did not expect that, then who would ever pave that? And looks like it would default to the city because there's not likely other developers. No, not other subdivisions that are likely to happen on half of that land.
Are you saying fight for the other exit or fighting for the paving?
For the paving of this, I don't know.
It would,
That would kind of be option one, where you're just eliminating the requirement because you didn't feel like it was expected.
I imagine what will happen is people move in there, they'll come to the council and say, why don't you pave that section? You can wait until that happens.
Well,
The ones on the south end.
I would prefer it if we had Mr. Bergeson here
Yeah.
to talk to us. So I would move that we table this to a meeting in September.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll second.
all right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Very good. We'll move on to item number 23, motion issuing zoning text amendment to allow electric vehicle charging related to equipment encroachments to be exempt from landscape area calculation.
So this is a referral to staff from Representatives Ames 4. They've installed a number of vehicle chargers. And as a previously developed site that is kind of stuck with having to conform to current zoning, they had to make a change in their paving to allow for these other improvements to occur to the site. So they're asking for in their case, for the chargers to be exempt from our lot coverage, our landscape percentage standards. And we've given you a couple of options to way to look at that. You could narrowly look at it of excluding chargers and the transformer equipment that goes with that from that landscape calculation. Or you could look at it in broader terms. Do you think there's other things that you would want to loosen up on an existing site and maybe make it a percentage allowance rather than just targeted towards electric vehicle chargers? I think the issue, the chargers themselves would probably never have gotten to this point. It's the transformer that always goes with these things. So we treat transformers uniformly across the city. They're not treated differently if you have a vehicle charger versus an air conditioner attached to it. So it's really that transformer piece that's what tripped up Ames 4, not the chargers themselves, but it gets all lumped together when you start to look at these things. So I guess we're looking at direction. Staff feels some latitude for existing sites is probably warranted. You're not going to have any perceptible difference on this site if you were to hold it to the existing standard or not. So we're just looking at which option would be best to allow for some relief here.
Questions, comments?
Would this be just in commercial zones?
Yes.
So
like in RH, there is no landscape standard for coverage. So if you were at an apartment complex, this particular standard doesn't even apply to you.
So we're putting these in the Baker subdivision, the apartments.
It wouldn't impact that project.
Yeah.
Whether you make a change or not, that standard doesn't apply to that
Right.
project.
Okay.
So it's a commercial standard. Yeah. So it's a commercial or an industrial standard.
Okay.
All right, is there anyone that wants to offer public comment on this? Closed public input, entertain a motion on one of the alternatives.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you. Move on to item number 24, resolution approving amendment for North Dayton Avenue Industrial Park TIF agreement.
Any questions on this one?
Extending the time frame.
To May of next year.
All right, anybody want to offer open public comment? Anyone want to offer comment on this one? Close public input, entertain a motion.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right. Thank you, Kelly. Mr. Com. All right, Council, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Com on this particular item, or Don, you want to hit a highlight?
Just real quick, the reason why this particular item was pulled off consent, just to talk to council about this, is the nuance on this project is normally when we're going to do a project on the power plant, we go out and get a construction bid or a construction permit, excuse me, from the Iowa DNR. So we're required to do that. Because of the long lead time for this particular equipment, it takes about 58 weeks to acquire this equipment. We have yet do not have a permit. So there's an infinitesimally small risk that we could never get a permit from the Iowa DNR to install this. We call that an insignificant or insignificantly small risk because there's nothing in this process that would say that they will not grant us a risk. But we wanted to make sure that council was aware of that. So as we order this equipment, we are ordering this and it'll sit on the shelf until we receive that permit from the Iowa DNR.
Questions? All right, open up public comment. If anyone want to address council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Entertain a motion on resolution waiving the city's purchase policy and procedures requirement for formal bidding requirements and awarding a single source purchase.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. I entertain a motion on resolution awarding contract to Arvos Lundstrom from Palatine, Illinois for the purchase of air heater baskets with power plant in the amount of $338,141.40 inclusive of sales tax.
So
Mayor,
moved.
can I just ask, is that correct? Is it Palatine, Illinois, or it says Wellsville, New York in the,
Staff report.
yeah.
I believe it. I would have to look at the details in the council action form. We can confirm that, but I believe it is Palatine, Illinois. Also where Weber kettles are made, Weber grills are made.
Then the
But I'll-
staff report is incorrect.
I will
just
I
wanna
will
make
double
sure
check
we're-
that and make sure that we correct that for the minutes.
All right, let's entertain motion resolution awarding the contract to Arvos Lundstrom for the purchase of air heater baskets for the power plant in the amount of $338,141.40 inclusive of sales tax.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 26, Sands McDormand property. Keith. Yes, is there any questions for Keith on this item? You're welcome to highlight it, but I think your staff report was well done.
Yeah, I'll just entertain any questions if anybody has any.
Exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yep. Yes, it is. We're excited.
And maybe you just want to share that, the purchase price is 1,146,474, but we're not paying for all of it. Maybe you could highlight that for those who might be watching.
Yes, we've been awarded 2 grants. One, the Resource Enhancement Program grant from the DNR. That's for $200,000, better known as a REAP grant. And then we also submitted a grant for the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, and we're awarded $175,000. So between the two, $375,000 in grants, and which comes out to about $74,000 roughly is what will be taken out of the Park Development Fund, which is pretty healthy right now, which is just over 1.3 million.
And then also just, I know it's in your report, but just maybe for the public like watching, what's the schedule after property is purchased? So people aren't expecting this to be all of a sudden turned into a park in a matter of a few months.
Correct. Yeah, it's just the development of this park will take millions. There's no doubt about it. We'll need to get together with hold community input sessions, see what the community wants out of this park. We'll have to develop a plan, and then most likely will be a phased plan. In the meantime, what the city staff will be doing is we'll start going in and eliminating hazard trees, taking out some barbed wire, some fencing, and so on. Our goal would be is once we get that done, that we could open up the property, mow some paths, through the prairie area, and allow people to start walking it. And I think that would really help for staff or for the residents to get out there, see what the property is like, and then be able to help kind of form what we do with the property once we do develop it.
Keith, do we anticipate any challenges with the seller's access to their other parcel of land? Is the access just going to be through the, I don't know, the entryway and parking lot or something, or?
Yeah, and what we'll be doing is we've had multiple conversations with the seller, and there are two areas. They have an area north of the creek and then south of the creek. Right now, there's a predefined path, that you can access both of those areas. If we were to do development, I've had conversation with the seller. If we do get to development within the 10-year period, we would just define another access or way to access, and they were absolutely fine with that.
All right, open up public comment. Does anyone who wants to address council on the purchase of the Sands McDormand property? Seeing none, I close public input. Entertain motion on resolution approving purchase agreement for the Sands McDormand property at 5658 Ontario Street for the price of $1,146,474.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 27, hearing on nuisance assessment. Any questions for staff on this one? Otherwise, we'll move into open public comment on this item.
Guess I will ask.
Wait, I'm sorry. I see no one wants to offer public input. Close the public hearing, and we'll go ahead, Anita.
Just whether or not we have any communication from this individual. Sorry.
Certainly. Anyone?
Not aware of any.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Entertain a motion on resolution assessing cost of snow and ice removal and removal of vegetation and right of way and certifying assessments to the Story County Treasurer.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you. Move on to item number 28, second reading of minimum exterior property maintenance ordinance. Good evening, Sarah. Council, you saw the changes made to the first reading at your direction. Sarah and Rich, do you want to make any comments on this?
Just want to clarify, you've read through the report. There's 3 changes we made based on your input from the last meeting. There was a little bit of confusion with the yard waste one, so we wanted to make sure that we captured that accurately. And then also we do want to make sure that we have a separate motion tonight to add in an effective date.
Of the ordinance. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anita, do you want to address that item on the yard waste?
Yeah, on yard waste number 3, I wanted to clarify to make it read, yard waste stored on the exterior of a property in anything other than a trash disposal container or branches broken down and bundled for longer than 7 days. So those would be exempt.
So not the yard waste.
But not the plastic bags.
So specifically, section 30.5, subparagraph 3, the word that's highlighted in the draft ordinance, yard waste bag would be struck
Yes.
from,
From that, yes.
okay, is that a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay. Everyone understand the motion? Mark, to amend an ordinance, do we do voice vote or does it require roll call? Just make sure we're on right.
An amendment can just be a voice vote.
Thank you.
A motion.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Secondly, there was a request to, you want to just explain, Sarah, why, or Rich, why the effective date, the staff's requesting this effective date would be like January 1 of 2024.
Yeah, that's just a date we picked. We still have to establish an appeal board, bring back some zoning changes, potentially some rental code changes to make the whole municipal code work well together, and then just an opportunity for us to update all of our documents, reflect the new code sections and educational materials. So
Okay. Is there a motion to add the provision that the effective date of the ordinance will be January 1 of 2024?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Any other changes?
I would move that we strike section 22 regarding the travel trailers and RV parking, because I don't think those are, strictly speaking, maintenance issues, and they are covered in the zoning code as parking issues.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those-
And then I have a second motion to go along
Okay.
with that.
All right, any opposed or abstaining?
Oh, sorry.
Motion carried, please.
In place of that, I would like to see us put in a different section 22, which would read travel trailers, recreational vehicles, boats or boat trailers not in compliance with the Ames Municipal Code section 29.406, section 19, manufactured home, mobile home, and recreational vehicle parking, which would allow us to enforce using the zoning code if there are issues.
Is there a second?
Second.
I understand that staff preferred that because of the enforcement issues with using the zoning code.
yeah, so the intent of the property maintenance code is to have kind of a one-stop shop for our customers. So most of the regulations are in one spot. It also gives us the same appeal abilities, enforcement structure, fine structure as everything else. For example, we've changed the fine structure in this to $50. If it stayed strictly in the zoning code, it would be $500. So we have the same abilities as we do with all the other things we've adopted in this ordinance if we refer to the zoning code. And this is very similar to subsection 20, which says luminaires not in compliance with the outdoor lighting code, which is also in the zoning code. And then also the visibility triangle subsection 23 is also in the zoning code. So this helps us if changes are made to that code section, this would still reflect any changes in the future to those sections.
Sarah, could you clarify for the public and for council, if we adopt this, would we be allowing RVs then to park in the front of homes?
So this would change nothing from what is currently allowed. So this would refer to the existing zoning code that states that an RV, boat trailer can be parked on a property, one of them, behind the front yard setback. That's the only place on an approved surface behind the front yard setback. That's currently what's in place today.
And my intention is in the future, once we have gone through the rest of this process where we are making those zoning code changes and everything, once all of that is done, I will come back to council with a motion that we change the zoning code, but in isolation from this larger property maintenance discussion so that people who are concerned about that parking issue can go through the zoning code process and we can get public input just on that issue. Because I still believe people should be able to park on their driveways in front of their homes. But I'm removing it from the discussion now so that we can bring it back later. Because there seemed to be concern about people not having input on that issue and there being
Well, we
backlash.
didn't have input.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's no input, so I'm going to make that motion
That
later.
motion was made, you didn't give council any kind of lead time on
All
this.
right, all right.
You brought this on
That's
as the
fine.
day of that meeting.
Tim.
Yes, I
that's-
did, but that's fine.
I have a question. Are there any other issues like this that are both in the zoning ordinance and in the property maintenance code?
I don't think specifically. There are some cleanup items that Kelly would like to bring back at some point to make them align better. The idea is that the property maintenance code, the zoning code is a development standard. It's how you build, where you can build. This is after it's built. How do we maintain these property maintenance codes? So we're really trying to take the enforcement pieces out of the zoning code and put it in here as more of an enforcement code.
Great.
But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything specifically that is verbatim from the zoning code.
So if we don't add this, nothing changes from the current state because it's in zoning code.
Correct. The ordinance doesn't change. The requirement doesn't change. Our ability to enforce under what we've added to the property maintenance code changes. So if we enforce strictly under the zoning code, the first violation is going to be $500 and any appeal is going to go to ZBA. If we refer to it through this code, the first fine would be $50 and the appeal would go to the board that we've established for this code.
So when you take this out, it's going to be the way it sits now. You can't, you will not be able to park on the driveway. You have to have your those items, the RV and everything behind the front setback of the house, right? The way it is now.
It's like that either way if we add this language or not.
Right. But there's an opportunity
My
for staff to
concern
do
is
some
then
education
when we
too.
change it after.
Right.
That's up to
Education
you. It has
becomes
to be
part of
a
it.
motion to add it back later on.
Right.
Like Gloria will do. You'll have to make that as a separate decision later on. Right?
Mhm.
The property maintenance code will pass without that change in there. Will be excluded and you return to the zoning ordinances in effect today. But if there are violations, at least she could do it, she'll be able to work through that property maintenance board, which we're going to create, not the ZBA or whatever. That's the change with this additive language, which is a good thing.
So just to clarify, and I appreciate Amber's question. So there are lots of RVs parked in front of houses today. Drive around, they're all over the place. So what would be the fine today?
$500.
Okay.
So would you have two ordinances, or you'd have the zoning ordinance and this one in place? Does one supersede the other, or how does that work in terms of enforcement, or does one, see what
I
I'm
mean,
saying?
theoretically, you could pick to enforce under either. So we could pick the $50 fine or the $500 fine. I think our intent in keeping it in here is to use the $50 fine. So we wouldn't use that. And potentially as one of the cleanup items anyway, this comes out because it's not really a development standard. So cleaning up, I think the first part of the section about where mobile homes can be could potentially be left in the zoning code, but the enforcement of RVs is separate and would likely come out.
I see.
Yeah, we view this as the compliance portion, not the enforcement.
Okay. Any other questions? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Any other motions? All right, entertain a motion on second reading of minimum exterior property maintenance ordinance as amended this evening.
Move on second as amended.
Second.
Thank you.
So Mayor, we made some major progress tonight. Taking the RVs out of the front is huge for our community. And so I think that's good, and we'll pull that back in and have a robust conversation as a separate motion. I am still very concerned with the disparity between the treatment of weeds and turf grass. And I spent some time driving around Ames, and you know what? People mow the grass. People want to have a clean-looking neighborhood. And I worry that we are empowering people who just want to grow weeds. And I appreciate the people who came to council. I didn't really have a chance to commend them. And I don't doubt that there are many people who have strongly held beliefs that mowing is not a good thing for the environment and encourages, not mowing encourages pollinators. But I want to suggest that that's not representative of the entire community. It probably is only a very small portion. I think our community has an expectation that people maintain their yards in a consistent fashion. And I'm very concerned with the fact that we're creating a dilemma for the enforcement for our staff. So I think we made great progress tonight, but I will be voting against this because of this glaring inconsistency.
Roll call.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you, Sarah and Rich, for your efforts on
Yes,
this.
Thanks for all the work.
you.
And Mark also, thank you.
Yes.
Work, a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of-
All right, item 29, entertain a motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4509 on zoning text amendment to allow for sports practice facility as a use within the general industrial GI zoning district of section 29.901 of the Ames Municipal Code.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Moving on to disposition and communications council. We have 4 items this evening. First is from Justin Dodge, comments on proposed duplex criteria. And I believe I'm the one that sent this on to Renee, and this actually should have been going to somebody else. Is that right?
They're taking public input on that issue, so there's no action required.
So this is for staff's information, not for
Yep,
council.
they'll compile feedback. They've had a public hearing on that, and they'll report back to you.
Okay. Secondly is a email from a number of people regarding a grant application for the Chautauqua Park and Ridgewood Addition nomination to National Register of Historic Places.
I would move that we get a staff memo on this.
Second.
Thank you.
Have we done anything like this in the past with other organizations?
Done what? I
A
mean,
similar type of spending city dollars on something like this? Have we done this in the past?
Yes.
when we worked on the old town, our original historic preservation district,
Okay.
spent a lot of time and money.
Okay, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carried. Item 3 is from an email from Sam and Bob Schaefer regarding a hard surface and sanitary exemption request.
I think we should refer for a memo. They've had some legitimate issues here.
I would move that we get a memo on this.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Last is a staff report on amending Auburn Trail contract rezoning for shared use path.
I think we should have a memo on this one too. I think there's an argument to be made for this.
Or do you want to refer it to, or just refer it to a future agenda? Is it complete enough or not?
If you think it's complete enough. Oh, this is staff
Yeah.
report. Excuse me.
Right.
Yeah.
Excuse me. This
I would move we put this on a future agenda.
good catch.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I earned my pay tonight.
Oh, good job. Good catch. You should read the agenda more.
All right. Council comments. Quinn, welcome.
Yes.
Maybe you could tell us just a little about yourself and then also what the next steps are.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. So thank you for the introduction earlier. My name is Quinn Margaret. I'm here tonight as Speaker of the Student Government Senate. This responsibility kind of fell to me in the absence of an ex officio right now. And so I did want to mention while I had the platform that I want to make sure to communicate that some of the turnover we've seen in this role doesn't imply any sort of lack of respect for this council or for our relationship with you all. And so obviously the discussions we have here is incredibly important when we're guiding the decisions we make as a student government. And I know from the student body perspective as a whole, it's great to have a representative representing students. And so Student Body President Holliday and I are always looking for ways to strengthen that relationship. And kind of that first step is having a consistent liaison here. And so in the next couple weeks, we're trying to figure out who that's going to be. And how we can have more stability there, because we definitely very much value this dialogue. So that's, I think, the update there, unless there are any questions. But I also wanted to say thank you for the hospitality and, welcoming me in the meantime.
Thank you. And I'm not sure, I think I mentioned, but Tabitha, who was on.
Mhm. Yeah, that's something we were made aware of today. So that's why you weren't informed, prior to me showing up this meeting.
That she has decided not to continue. So,
So one point of feedback I would have, over the last 10 years, we've had a range of people range of engagement. And for what it's worth, I think it'd be valuable to encourage representatives that we invite their input. So, I mean, there are times when we go for weeks and there would be no input. So yes, they can be listening, but we also want to hear and learn the student perspective. And so they don't have to have an opinion on everything, but you're half the population. And so if we're going to have a representative, we want to invite input from the student representative. So that's part of what we would hope would occur.
Certainly, yeah. And I'd certainly share that expectation if we can get someone here for a longer duration of time so they can get a lot more familiar with some of these issues. We're going to have an application process for this role moving forwards. And so I've lived in Ames a long time. I've done a lot of work regarding this town. I certainly have that expectation as well of whoever is next, that they're engaged and really want to involve the student perspective. I absolutely share that.
Yeah, thanks.
and if I could be of assistance, let me know. And we're
Certainly.
talking to some people. And also, Council Quinn also was serving as the ISU student government representative on Asset, right, for a while.
Yeah. Yes.
So I really appreciate the fact that you have demonstrated engagement with the community on. So thank you for your efforts.
Certainly.
Appreciate
And
it.
we're definitely looking for more representatives from student government there as well.
Yeah.
Build our presence.
You got your hands full. And plus, are you going to school?
Some of the time.
Okay.
A little bit.
All right. Welcome.
Less so this week.
Bronwyn.
I had one question about what, sometimes for dispositions to communication to council, we cover just emails we've gotten and electronic, but sometimes we also cover verbal comments that were presented at the beginning of the meeting, and sometimes we miss them too. So I've seen both happen. And anyway, tonight, during public input, there was a question about the parking enforcement. And I guess I was wondering if we might reach out to Marilyn and let her know that we did, in fact, when we made the ordinance, we allowed the latitude to rope in other events such as football games, but really we are relying on the input of the police department and our staff to know when to deploy that tactic, and that they feel, that we put a lot of trust and faith in them to tell us when it's important to deploy parking restrictions as a control in those residential neighborhoods. So she made a few comments like, why don't we do it for football games? And anyway, I was just wondering if we could reach out and let her know that we can in fact do that, and we rely on staff.
I think maybe too, like some historical context of why we put the ordinance in
Yeah.
place, and the requests made from Iowa State and obviously the two police departments, and that it wasn't just us up here deciding
Being fuddy-duddies.
ha, we're going to
Exactly.
stick it to the students.
Right.
Honestly, I'd love to know why we saw those signs, because I don't know why the police department decided to put those signs up.
Well,
And whether we're going to be using them for games. So I would love to, instead of just having the response to Maryland, to get something from the chief that just says, we're going to use these for all football season, or we're just going to put these up, or.
Well, they say immediate towing, so I don't think they would be unless.
Didn't we go
decided
before
to
council and got
expand.
approval for
Yeah,
this?
we would have to approve.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just don't know where the signs came from or why they decided to put them up. I was surprised by them. So.
Oh, I can
That's
tell
all.
you why I put them up,
Yeah,
because if we don't, people will be
will
like,
say
you
we didn't
didn't
know.
warn us.
But we have not done them
Yeah, we did.
before.
Yeah, we
Last
have.
year.
We
We
had
did
them
last
They
year.
just weren't the same.
They weren't
They
green.
weren't green.
Yeah.
Oh, because I didn't notice them at all last
They
year.
were up
And this
last
They were
year,
everywhere.
there
In
they
fact,
were.
the chief made it very clear that they had staff out there, and it took quite some time to install them all.
Yeah.
And then they also went out there the next day to remove them all,
Yeah.
and to try and salvage what they could. So yeah, I think it was a green the green color was the
Really
difference.
stood out this year. I didn't notice them last year.
Well,
I bet
and
there was probably a comment that people didn't notice them
Mhm.
last year, and now they're
They made it
neon
big.
green.
Anyway, just so, do you need a
I-
motion that we would reach out? Or-
you certainly can. I did write down her name and phone number to try and do exactly that. Because I think it's important to have some, and I do also know her personally too. So
I would just, move that we direct the mayor to respond to
Yeah, okay.
Marilyn DeVig's comment from public.
Second.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I do. I appreciate your comment on the follow up, and I think I try and take notes. I'll miss it once in a while,
Yeah.
But I think it is important for us to respond and consider public input that may be offered that warrants a follow up. So, anything else?
Well, I was just going to say that welcome back students, and we have a lot of related events. So we had the Cyclone Welcome Weekend this past weekend, and a number of us were volunteering for that in different ways. And then Welcome Fest tomorrow, we'll be there again. So if students are watching at home, stop by and see us.
That's right.
That's all I've got, really.
All right, thank you, Rachel.
I was gonna say welcome back, students too.
Amber, anything?
Nothing for me.
Same thing. Welcome back.
Couple things. It's hot, and we ask a lot of our city staff in extreme weather situations, whether the cold or the heat, and just a word of thanks to our city staff who they don't get to sit in the air conditioning tomorrow and the next day, so we appreciate them. Secondly, we have entered, in my 10 years, an unprecedented black hole of press coverage. I have tried to reach out to the Ames Tribune to no effect. And I'm very concerned about the way in which we conduct our business. We rely on a press both for communicating what we're doing to the community, but also for the community to know about things that we're doing to get back to us. And there's this property maintenance code is a good example. I think the vast majority of the community has no idea what we've, depending on your perspective, done to them or for them. And I am very concerned about this. There will be more issues to come, and there's no press coverage. And if it wasn't for the Iowa State Daily, we wouldn't have any press coverage. And I hope that there's continued Iowa State Daily coverage. And then final, it's August 22nd, and to my knowledge, I'm the only candidate that's announced for reelection. Have you
No.
announced?
Yeah.
Daily's
Yeah.
got an article.
Oh, the Daily has an article. Well done, Daily. And so it's so that's been addressed. So those are my comments for the night.
Welcome back, students. It'd be nice to see people at the Welcome Fest. We had a good time at the Cyclone Welcome Weekend barbecue event. This afternoon, the mayor and Councilmember Rollins and I were at the ACPC ribbon cutting for their new infant room, which has cots for 8 infants, and there are 40 people on the waiting list already for that particular service. It's a wonderful facility, and they also have a newly designed library that is just beautiful. So, great project, excellent way to spend American Rescue Plan funding, and I'm hoping that facility can expand further.
Very good.
And welcome Quinn.
Yes.
All right. That I have no comment. I already made my comments to Quinn and students too. So, all right, Mark, does City Council have justification for going into closed session?
Yes, Mayor, the council can go into closed session under Iowa Code Section 21.51C to discuss matters of litigation or threatened litigation.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right. Very good.
Wednesday.
No,
Yeah.
No, I already shared with him that his evening is over.
Yeah.
TV broadcast is back. There we go. All right, we are back in open session. And is there a motion relative to what was discussed during closed session?
I would move we pursue the action discussed in closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
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 Nay.
All right. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second,
Second.
favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.